The first time my adopted son suggested I sell my house and move into a nursing home, I thought he was joking. The second time, he said it without even blinking. "Since you're so poor, Mom, a care facility is the best place for people like you. You could sell this place, buy me a house, and still have a roof over your head." I'm 75. I raised Jacob since he was a year old. I taught him to walk, to read, to drive. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and any hope of retirement comfort to make sure he had everything a boy could need. And now, with a straight face, he was telling me I should give up my home, my life's anchor, so he could have a new one. I didn't argue that night. I didn't cry either. Instead, I smiled politely, poured him another cup of tea, and quietly decided that if my son wanted to play cruel, he was about to meet a side of me he'd never seen. Because I knew one thing Jacob didn't: sometimes the past has teeth. He sat at my kitchen table like a guest instead of the boy who once taped marble drawings to my fridge. He'd come in half an hour late with a crisp shirt, an expensive watch, and a tone he must have picked up from someone who practiced being heartless. There was a new woman, of course. I'm not unobservant. Her name was Lorna. She worked in real estate and treated me like a pothole in the road, annoying, unavoidable, and always my fault for being there. "Lorna says we should be smart," he said, stirring sugar into his tea he wouldn't drink. "Your house market value is at an all-time high. I could build equity, get us out of this renting trap." "Us?" I asked. "Do you mean you and Lorna, or you and your conscience?" He didn't laugh. "It's a plan that helps everyone." "Everyone at this table?" I asked. "Or everyone at the bank?" He gave me the patient smile people reserve for toddlers who want a cookie before dinner. "Mom, try to be reasonable." Reasonable. I have held men's hands while they died and badgered insurance companies until they coughed up checks. Reasonable is a sweater I can wear in my sleep. But that night I folded it up and set it aside. "Let's not fight," I said. "Eat your pie." He didn't touch the pie either. He stood, kissed my cheek with air, and left my kitchen cleaner than he found it. When the door clicked shut, my house went very still. I listened to that stillness like it was an alarm. Then I got my purse and my shoes and walked to the bus stop. I didn't call anyone. I didn't leave a note. I have always believed you do the hardest thing on your own feet. The county records building is the color of bad toothpaste, and it smells like paper that once carried tears. The elevators stutter. The clerks have the steady hands of people who file away entire lives and label them with numbers. A woman with a gray braid and a cardigan that had outlived 2 fashions looked up at me. "How can I help you?" "I need the adoption file for a baby brought in March, 30 years back," I said. Mother's first name might be Lissa. Potential father called himself Duke. The intake nurse wrote that the baby had a tiny scar under his left ear and that he made a sound like a bird when he slept. Her eyebrows rose. "You were the adoptive mother?" "Yes." "And you waited this long to pull the file?" "Yes." She didn't ask why. Bless her for that. She took my driver's license and my patience and disappeared. When she came back, she carried a thin box that felt heavier than a cinder block. I took it to a table and opened it like it could explode. Inside were photocopies, staples, a hospital bracelet so small I could have worn it as a ring, 2 Polaroids, and a social worker's notes written in firm, disappointed letters. The Polaroids had that washed-out 90s blue. In one, a skinny girl with fierce eyes held a bundled infant and looked everywhere but the lens. In the other, a man slouched on a broken porch step, cigarette between 2 fingers. Jaw set like he'd picked a fight with the world and the world had obliged. The notes were worse. Smudged bottles. Empty fridge. Neighbor reported shouting. Intervention declined. The kind of sentences that make you put your head down in your hands for a moment because looking is painful. There was an address for a trailer park off County Road 7. There was also a name that punched my breath out: Avery. I remembered that braid. She'd put Jacob in my arms in a rectangular room that smelled like lemon cleaner and cold coffee. "You'll do," she had said. Then she'd corrected herself quickly, as if she'd let too much truth out. "I mean, he'll do well with you." I copied the address and the number Avery had listed for future concerns. I folded the notes and returned the box with the kind of reverence you give a holy book. Then I went hunting the way only old women can hunt. Polite questions, The right name at the right church office, a woman who owes your quilting circle a favor and is happy to pay it with a phone call. I found Avery in a duplex with chipping paint and a yard that preferred dandelions. She opened the door in slippers and relief. I wondered how long it would take, she said, as if I'd called ahead. Come in, Kayla. You remember me? I remember all my babies, she said. Some names, some scars. The bird whistle boy? I remember him more than most. We sat at a scarred table, and she put out 2 mugs that had never met the dishwasher. She listened while I told her what Jacob had said. I expected her to offer a balm. She did not. Cruelty is a language people learn from hunger, she said. Sometimes from the mouths that fed them. Sometimes from other mouths. I waited too long, I said quietly. She nodded. Yes. Can I fix it? Maybe, she said. If you cut the lie open and hold it up to the light. She still had a notebook she should not have kept. Caseworkers weren't supposed to take original notes home, but the state underpays those who care and overpays those who sign, and sometimes decency breaks the rules. She set the notebook between us like a shared sin. The pages were angry with ink. The entries painted a picture I hadn't let myself see when I was younger, a baby with hollow cheeks and 2 quiet eyes, a mother who loved like a storm, a man who gambled with every living thing he touched. Do you know where they went? I asked. Last I heard, Lissa was with a man named Ron in a trailer off the highway, she said. Duke's dead. His kind usually are. Lissa's kind usually aren't. They just get thinner. I went after lunch. The sky had that low-bellied look it gets when it's thinking about rain but hasn't made up its mind. The trailer park was a geography lesson in neglect. A boy on a bike glanced at me with a veteran's suspicion. Half the units had satellite dishes like metal mushrooms. At number 17, a plastic flamingo slumped over into a dirt flower bed as if it had given up the performance. I knocked. The door opened after a long pause, like it had to talk it over with itself first. Lissa stood there in a tank top and that ponytail from the Polaroid, only tired now. Her eyes were still a dare. You the lottery? She asked. No, I said. I'm the past. She tried to shut the door. I put my palm on it. I'm not big, but grief will make a woman strong enough to stop all kinds of doors. I adopted your son, I said. She let go of the knob and put her hand over her mouth. The sound she made wasn't a sob and wasn't a laugh. It was the sound a person makes when the trap springs and they realize they baited it with their own dinner. Bird, she said. Then she swallowed the word like it hurt. She let me in because shame is easier to carry when a witness shares the weight. The trailers smelled like nicotine and fried bologna. A man snored in a recliner, Ron, I guessed. Somewhere a television murmured about a crime that belonged to other people. Lissa sat me at a table with a wobbly leg and picked up a cigarette she'd stubbed out to answer the door. She lit it like a prayer. I don't want money, I said. I want truth. That's the one thing I ever had, she muttered. Except when I didn't. We talked. Correction, she talked, and I held us up. I learned how she named him Bird because his breathing whistled. How she watered down the formula because she thought stretching it was thrift and not theft. How the neighbor called because the fights were loud and because love that loud breaks a baby's sleep. I loved him, she said. I loved him like a circle. I never knew how to make a line out of anything. Lines are boring, I said. Until they keep you from falling. Are you going to tell him? She asked. People always want to know whether their worst minutes will be broadcast. Yes, I said. Not to hurt him. To show him why he should stop hurting me. She nodded like a penitent. Tell him Duke sold the crib, she said. Tell him I cried until I threw up, and then I told the lady from the state it was the flu because the lie was easier to say than the truth. Tell him I got sober for a week once and bought him a blue sleeper at Goodwill and then blew the sobriety and pawned the sleeper for cigarettes and cried because that's why you called him Bird, right? The crying? Because of the breathing, I said. He slept like a steam kettle. She smiled, something small. He got that from me. The man in the recliner jerked awake and cursed. He lifted his head and sniffed the air, disoriented. Who's this? He asked. Nobody, Lissa said. Somebody. He went back to sleep, which was a mercy. When I left the trailer, the sky finally made up its mind and sent a light rain that pinned my hair to my head. I stood in it on purpose to wash some of the air off me. In my bag were copies of Avery's notes, a photograph of the hospital bracelet, a folded napkin with Liss's trembling signature, and a scrap of truth that weighed more than any deed. I made chicken and biscuits that night. Jacob was late again. He walked in with that watch and a smell of cologne I'd never bought him. He didn't notice the extra place setting. He noticed nothing, which is its own talent. "Smells good," he said, like a fake sun in a television ad. "It is good," I agreed. "Sit." He did. I let him eat 2 biscuits before I slid the hospital bracelet across the table. He picked it up with a frown and then looked at me because my little boy used to look at me when he didn't understand a word on a page and expected me to translate. "That was your name," I said. For a little while. "What is this?" "Original ID. Before me." He set it down carefully as if it could burn. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you told me to sell my home and buy you one," I said, in the same tone I used to comment on the weather. "Because you called me poor like it was a slur. Because you said a nursing home was the best place for people like me. Sit up straight. Listen. This is your story and the sentences nobody wanted to say out loud." He listened. "I have never loved him more, and I have never loved him less. That is how truth works. It splits you and demands you knit yourself back together in a different shape." I read Avery's notes. I put the Polaroids down, face up, so he couldn't pretend we were reading fiction. I told him about the watered-down formula and the missing crib and the neighbor, and the day the social worker wrote, "Intervention recommended, family declined." He stared at the man on the porch smoking like he wanted to light the page on fire. He stared at the girl with the wild hair like a mirror he didn't want to own. "You waited 30 years, he said finally. "Yes," I said. "Because I was a coward. Because I thought telling you would make you leave, and then you'd be hungry in 2 houses instead of 1. He shut his eyes. Then he opened them and asked the question love always asks when it wakes up in a fight. "What do I do?" "First," I said, "you apologize without the word, but..." He swallowed. Put his hands flat on my table. Stared at my knuckles, which looked like a map. "I am sorry, Mom." "No buts." I said vile things. "I forgot who I am. I forgot who you are." "Second," I continued, "because contrition that doesn't move its feet is theater. You stop letting anyone measure you with a mortgage. You and that woman. Lorna. Break up tonight. I don't care if you text or write a sonnet. You don't get to bring someone into my house who talks about my life like it's a yard sale." He almost laughed. Then he didn't. "Third," I said, "we go see your mother." His mouth opened like a fish's. He shut it. He nodded once and then twice, as if agreement arrived like rain too. When we drove to the trailer, he squeezed the door handle like it could keep him afloat. Lissa opened the door and saw him and put both hands to her chest like a bad actress and a better mother. "You're tall," she blurted. "You called me Bird," he said. "You whistled." He didn't step over the threshold at first. He looked at me and I tilted my head. He went in. They sat. Ron snored with his mouth open. I watched my son watch the woman who gave him his face shape and his worst luck. He asked no questions about the bar fights or the cat or the cigarettes. He asked about the blue sleeper from Goodwill, and she cried into her hands the way girls cry when they're old. We stayed half an hour. On the way home, he didn't speak until the light at the turn for our street. Then he said, "You loved me like a line." I did. She loved me like a circle. She did. "Can you teach me both?" "I can," I said. "But you can't build a house on a circle." He told Lorna that night and came back with his cologne scrubbed off and the watch boxed like an apology. Over the next weeks, I watched him become someone I recognized. He sold the watch, picked up a second shift hauling brush at the city lot, learned what it feels like to be tired with pride instead of tired with shame. He started showing up with rakes and questions. He asked about the squeak in the back door and the humming in the fridge and whether I could teach him to cook chicken that wasn't dry. We didn't talk about houses. We talked about budgets, which are less sexy and more honest. I showed him the stack of envelopes where I kept the tax receipts. I showed him the little ledger where I track cash with a pen that smells like blueberries. He grimaced a little and kept writing. On a Tuesday that smelled like rain again, we sat in the lawyer's office. The receptionist wore a blouse with cherries and a smile she had to practice. My lawyer has white hair and the patience of someone who has listened to 3,000 siblings argue over their mother's wedding ring. I want the house in a trust, I said. It keeps housing me until housing isn't useful, and then it houses someone else. Your son, the lawyer asked, glancing at Jacob. Maybe, I said. If he earns it. Otherwise, the community center and the girls who need a place to learn algebra when the kitchen table at home is dangerous. The lawyer smiled like he wished more clients were older women. We signed. The folder thumped shut like a period. When we got home, Jacob tripped over a rug he's tripped over for 25 years and swore softly, then apologized for swearing, then laughed at himself for apologizing. We drank tea. He watched the steam and then said, Lissa asked if I'd come again. You will, I said. You won't go alone until you're ready to hold her hand and let go the same day. He nodded. What if I want to help her? You will, I said again. But you won't save her. Saving is a line. She lives in circles. You offer a chair instead of a sermon. A month later, he brought me a lease with his name on it. Not a house, an upstairs apartment that groaned underfoot and let in afternoon sun like a blessing. We hung shelves and I taught him what a stud finder is and what it isn't. He put the hospital bracelet in a frame on the mantel next to a picture of me holding a baby with hair like a dandelion. Reminder, he said, of where we started. Reminder, I agreed, of where we don't end. Then, because stories like to circle back to the beginning whether you want them to or not, Lorna called. She left a message with a sweetness so sharp it could etch glass. I hope you don't mind, she said, but I found a buyer for your place. A couple with cash. They're eager. If you two are serious about making moves, now's the time. Jacob listened on speaker. He looked at me. I shook my head once. He called her back and said no. He said it like a hammer. He didn't explain. He didn't justify. He hung up and put his phone face down as if it could misbehave. Good, I said. Now help me lift the cedar chest. There's a thing beneath it I should have given you a long time ago. We moved the chest, and I pulled out a biscuit tin with a dent from the day you were teething, I wanted to say, but that would make me sentimental, and I am only sentimental in private. The tin held baby shoes, a lock of hair, a photograph of his first snowman, and the letter I wrote to the boy I hadn't yet met the night before I took him home. I handed him the letter. He read it. When he finished, he put his face in his hands and breathed like a kettle. Lines and circles, he whispered. Lines and circles, I said. There are small victories that feel bigger than fireworks. He started bringing a bag of groceries on Sundays and cooking badly in my kitchen until he cooked less badly and then well. He started calling me before he made a hard decision, not to ask permission, but to say it out loud to someone who remembers his first lie and his first truth. He started stopping at Liss's trailer every other week with a bag of tangerines and a stack of AA meeting times if she wanted them. Sometimes she took the tangerines. Sometimes she took the paper. Sometimes she shut the door. Circles. One evening, he came over with a familiar tightness in his jaw. A man at work said something about blood versus paper, he muttered. As if adoption is a fake family. It made me want to break something. Break a thought instead, I said. Your blood didn't feed you. Your paper did. Blood is chemistry. Paper is promise. He smiled and the tightness unspooled. And then, because life insists on adding unexpected chapters after you think your book has reached its last page, Lissa called me. Is he there? She asked, skipping hello. He is, I said. Don't tell him I called, she said. Just listen. I listened. She told me she was sober for 6 days. She told me the cat died. She told me Ron left and then came back and then left again, and this time took the TV, because men like Ron think stealing pictures is the same thing as winning. She told me she'd found a Polaroid of Bird with his finger hooked in my necklace, and she'd slept with it under her pillow. She told me she was scared because I have been drunk for 30 years and now everything is loud. You can do 12 days, I said. Then you can do 13. You're not mad I called you? I am grateful you trusted me with a piece of your circle. She hung up fast. I didn't tell Jacob she called, not that night. Some truths you let arrive in their own clothes. 2 weeks later, he knocked on my door with that soft wariness I know means a big thing needs a small voice. He held out an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "A letter," he said. "From me. For you. Don't open it yet. It's my insurance. Like a deed, but different." I tucked it into the same drawer where I keep the scissors, because usefulness should live with usefulness. We made tea. He told me about a small house he'd driven by, not because he wanted me to co-sign, but because he wanted to say someday in a tone that belonged to him. I said someday back. That night, after he left, I took out the envelope. I held it against my chest for a full minute. Then I slid my finger under the flap and read. "Mom, the day I asked you to sell your house and go to a care home, I stopped being your son for a while. I've been patching the hole since. If I ever forget again, hand this letter to me and make me read it out loud. If I refuse, show it to whoever I love then, so they know what I used to be and what I'm trying to be now. You are not poor. You are rich in the ways that pay the only debts that matter. You gave me my name. You gave me lines when I would have wandered in circles. I'm sorry. I will spend the rest of my days being better than that sentence in your kitchen. Your son, Jacob." I cried. I let myself. Then I folded the letter exactly along its crease and put it back in the envelope and back in the drawer with the scissors. You don't display a thing like that. You carry it inward. A year went by without much drama. You think that means boredom. It does not. It means dinners you finish still loving the person across the table. It means text messages that say made soup, want some, and check the porch. It means he brought me a fern and killed it and brought me another and learned to mist instead of drown. It means I learned to take cash from him once a month because humility and pride both need to earn their keep. Then the phone rang and it was Lorna again, sharp voice dulled by circumstance. "Is Jacob with you?" she asked. "No." "Tell him I'm sorry." "For what?" "For the things I said." I told him moms are leverage. "I don't know why I said that." "You said it because you believe it," I said. "Beliefs are not mistakes. They are choices." Silence. "I'm sorry anyway." "Apology accepted," I said, and my voice surprised me by meaning it. "We don't owe each other more." I erased her number after that. Not from malice. From housekeeping. Something had shifted in the neighborhood, too. I caught the teenage girl 3 houses down putting a flyer in my mailbox for a car wash fundraiser. When I opened the door to wave, she looked startled, like the house had greeted her instead of me. I gave her $20 and a lesson about sponges. She gave me gossip, which is an old woman's payment. "Your son's cute," she said. "He's taken," I replied, which was true only in the sense that he is taken by the work of rebuilding something you tried to set on fire. "Shame," she said, and flounced off. We fell into a rhythm. Sundays here, Mondays at Liss's if she answered the door, Wednesdays with Leland at the woodshop where Jacob learned to make corners meet. He brought home a shelf he'd made with hand-cut dovetails and placed it on my wall like a benediction. I pretended not to cry. And, because stories like mine don't end with revenge so much as they end with a ledger that balances at last, here is the part you might have been impatient for and I'm stingy with. Jacob did meet his apology at the kitchen table, on his knees, hands on my apron like a child. He did say the words, "I was wrong and I am ashamed and I am grateful." He did call the nurse at the hospital where he was born and asked if he could send a donation to the neonatal fund. He did research watered-down formula and wrote an essay nobody assigned him to write about how poverty and addiction intersect, and then he shut up and listened to the people who live that intersection instead of reading them his paper. He did not buy a house that year. He learned how to keep the heat on without the thermostat spiking. He learned to make beef stew that makes the kitchen smell like safety. He learned to sit in a meeting with his fists unclenched when a coworker made a joke about real families, and then he learned to say, calmly, "I'm a real son," and go back to his work. What about Lissa? You'll want me to say she joined a program and planted a garden and made amends and never touched a cigarette again. That's not how circles work. She got sober for 20 days and then she didn't. She called me twice and hung up both times. She told Jacob once that she had a dream where he was a bird and she was a tree and she tried to hold him and broke a branch instead. He told her he liked the dream anyway. She laughed and cried at the same time and then asked for bus money. He gave her a ride and not the money and learned you can be kind without buying someone a ticket back to their worst place. And me? I did not sell my house. I sealed up the drafts and paid the taxes and put the deed in a trust that will outlive me. I bake on Fridays. I listen for cuddles. I keep the letter in the drawer with the scissors and the tape and the batteries because the tools that keep a life together belong with each other. The day Jacob signed the papers on his own small sideways house, he didn't tell me first. He brought me there. The front steps leaned like a tired man. The door stuck. The bathroom tile was not so much vintage as stubborn. He stood in the empty living room and spread his arms. Lines and circles, he said. Lines and circles, I answered. Where are the studs? He pointed, not perfectly, but close enough. We laughed. We made tea on a stove that still had the manufacturer's sticker on it. He brought out a little box and handed it to me. Inside was a marble, blue, deep as a bruise, bright as a planet. For your windowsill, he said. A reminder of that even rocks can roll, he said. And not all rolling is falling. We hung his hospital bracelet on a nail behind a framed map of the city, like a secret. We stuck a photograph of Lissa on the fridge and one of me on the mantel, not bigger than the other, exactly the same size. That night, when I let myself into my own house, the one he once told me to trade for a bed with rails and a view of a parking lot, I turned on the porch light and it flickered and I tapped it and it behaved. The phone rang. Jacob. How do I get water spots off the sink? He asked. Vinegar, I said. And patience. Lines and circles, he said. Lines and circles, I said. If you came here for fire, maybe you expected I'd burn bridges for warmth. I didn't. I put up railings for crossing. I found the people who built my son and showed him the architecture so he'd stop mistaking demolition for design. I cut the light open and held it to the light. It had teeth. So do I. And the sentence he said in my kitchen, the one that stopped my heart for a beat and then restarted it stronger, a nursing home is the best place for poor people like you, has been sanded down by apology and use. He knows now that people like me is a category so small it contains exactly one person, the woman who chose him, over and over, even when she waited too long to tell him why. He knows it better every time he rakes my leaves, every time he calls before he buys something large, every time he takes a bag of tangerines to a trailer that smells like old grease and trying. He knows it when he turns his heat down at night and sleeps under a quilt that my hands stitched and my blood did not. He is my son. Not by accident. Not by chemistry. By paper, by promise, by practice. If you want a word for that, I have one. Family. It doesn't fit in a file folder. It doesn't need a watch. It fits in a kitchen where the kettle sings and someone says, "Come eat before it gets cold," and the person sitting down says, with a grin he learned when he was very small, "Yes, Mom," and means it. And if one day I do need a nursing home, it will be because my bones vote for comfort over pride, not because anybody called me poor and meant it as an insult. Jacob will bring me a marble for my windowsill. He'll label my things in his neat printing. He'll make the nurse laugh with a joke he didn't learn from me. He'll leave the porch light on at my old house for a full week, just in case the past needs a soft landing before it flies away. Until then, I will sit in my armchair, the one with the faded arms, and I will eat pie that somebody finally learned not to burn. I will listen to the house breathe. I will answer the phone. I will keep the truth on the table where we can see it. And I will watch my son be the man I raised instead of the man the world tried to sell him. If you are a mother who waited too long, hear me. Tell it now. If you are a son whose mouth said something your heart didn't mean, hear me. Apologize without the word, but. If you are someone who thinks houses and love are negotiable, hear me, by your own walls. Borrow the recipes. And if you ever find yourself in a kitchen where the steam fogs the window and the tea stains the cups and someone says, with a decent amount of courage, "I'm sorry," make them a plate. Put the
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.